And we are live. Birch, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, Nathan. And you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Massive thank you for joining this morning on what is our first webinar together. This time we'll be tackling the last minute smart pricing and discounting tips for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which is just around the corner. Birch, before we dive in, I just wanted to ask you, perhaps you can just introduce yourself and tell us why you are quickly becoming the e-commerce pricing guy.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me for this webinar, and I hope it will be just the first of the many webinars that we will hold together in the coming months, years. We'll see. But yeah, let me properly first introduce myself, and then maybe I can also expand on why I'm kind of the e-commerce pricing guy. So, as my name tag is over there, my name is Burç, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Prisync, which is actually, like in a nutshell, an e-commerce pricing automation software. So in essence, our company, our software helps merchants of all sizes from all around the world benchmark their own prices against all the competitors in the market in an automated way. So instead of really compiling all those massive, dirty, boring Excel files that contain, all your competitors' prices here and there, which are error prone, which are, full of mistakes and everything, we automate all that competitive pricing benchmarking thing. And on top of that, we even go further and we help those merchants automatically reprice their products depending on the competition, but also not just competition, but depending on your profitability targets, depending on many other business objectives. So in a sense, like the software really automates all your pricing operations in an end-to-end manner. So it actually saves you a ton of time, but also helps you to improve your top line and bottom line. And since I've been in this business for about more than 10 years, I would say, I naturally became the e-commerce pricing guy because I actually eat, read, breathe, all the stuff that I kind of do are somewhat linked to pricing. So I consume a lot of content, and obviously I digest a lot of content. And then eventually I actually talk to a lot of people about pricing. I post on about pricing and all. So some people were actually already calling that name here and there. So I decided to actually call myself out, put that tag on LinkedIn. So voila, here we are. I'm the e-commerce pricing guy.
Mate, very exciting, and congratulations to what you've built over the years. Like the more and more brands I'm talking to, it's really nice. It's now on their radar, right? And they're saying, actually, we need to be smarter. We need to make our every bang for our buck work a bit harder. So it's really nice that people are starting to notice that. So, Birch, I've got a few questions. I encourage anyone listening to please ask questions. I'll get through as many as I can. Please. But starting with this one, Birch, I mean, time is of the essence, right? For any retailer I talk to, one of their biggest challenges is they just don't have enough hours in the day. And so what I want to know from you is that with a lot of our brands looking to automate as much as possible, they're looking at AI to try and speed things up and reduce the burden on them. Is dynamic pricing an automated discount tactic, or is it fairly manual?
Well, it's definitely a type of an automation, but I wouldn't really call it automated discounting because that would do a lot of harm. Let me actually stand against that by just sharing one very simple statistics from our own data, from our own software. So, like I said in the beginning, on top of this competitor price benchmarking bit, we also help merchants automatically reprice their products to a sweet spot, to a more optimized level. And out of all those repricing actions that we make on a daily basis, etc., about 60 to 65% of them are actually price increases. So dynamically, we also help those merchants automatically increase their prices to a more optimal level. This really happens because since people really since pricing really is an often afterthought on merchants' mind, they typically follow cost-based pricing strategies, like list pricing strategies. I mean, they actually kind of take their pricing for granted. So they actually buy the stuff from the supplier, they had a certain markup, margin, whatever, and then they actually kind of feel that they don't really have any chance to change that in the future, but they only take that for granted and then do all their marketing operations, etc. But if you actually take another look, or maybe a more fresh look into all your cost-based prices or list prices here and there, maybe once every week, once every month, you will notice that the market is not like that. So the market is way more dynamic than static. So people are also changing their prices, and especially in this year and in the last 2 years, inflationary environment, inflationary period, prices mostly went upwards, as we all can tell. So if you, for example, just stood at a certain price point for too long, well, you might have achieved the most competitive price point in the market. So you might have really been the cheapest price in the market. But you know what? You might have also been too cheap. So you might have really underpriced yourself. So we notice a lot of cases, for example, where this like merchant, again, follows the 10% profit margin, 20% profit margin, and they price their product, let's say, at £10, like £100. And we noticed that the next cheapest competitors, for example, around like 120. So with this dynamic pricing thing, really, we can still, if that's what you're after, like we can still maintain that cheapest pricing position in the market, but not with 100, but we might, for example, bring you to like 115, 119, so that you wouldn't really leave all those 15, 19 pounds on the table. You will just keep them in your pocket. So like long answer short, no, it's not an automated discounting thing. It's definitely a bit of an automation, but for good.
So, but let me just get this right. So I am going in as a brand and I'm saying, here's my 5 competitors that I always come across in kind of Google Shopping. Is there a limit on how many brands I can upload to compete against?
Not really. Actually, you know what? I mean, you don't even need to tell us who you are competing against, but that's also the piece where we help you with the heavy lifting. So you only need to provide us your product assortment, and this might be your full assortment. This might be your maybe strategic priorities, like certain brands that you would really like to, apply competitive pricing, because maybe some others have like MAP, retail recommended price and so on. So you only just provide us with your competitive assortment, and then we actually scan through your market. We identify all the competitors that are also retailing the same stuff. But then obviously you can do your own, filters. I mean, you can exclude certain competitors that are maybe irrelevant to you, and you can specify, highlight certain competitors and just maybe reprice against them. So it's really starting from, I would say, step 0. So you only need to tell us what you sell, and then we do the rest of the stuff.
Brilliant. So let's do a bit of role play, Birch. I sell climbing frames, for example. You've gone and had a look and seen everyone else that sells climbing frames. You've come to me and said, Nate, that climbing frame that you're selling at $599, actually the nearest possible competitor is selling that at $999. You've got some wiggle room to go up to. I then tell you the price I'm prepared to go up to, or the price that I'm prepared to go as low as. And if someone then drops it, so let's say climbing frame manufacturer B decides to go in at $299, what happens then? Do I stop serving my ads, Budge, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, it really also depends on your costs, obviously. So, I mean, let me explain this clearly. So we are not just a competitive pricing tool, competitive pricing software, but we are actually a pricing software, and pricing needs to be profitable in most cases, right? So if you're not following, we might maybe come to that, but if you're not following a specific strategy like lost leadership for a certain amount of time, certain amount of products, well, you need to also have profitable prices. So for example, just one functionality in our software is that we also input the cost of goods sold information of our clients. So if, for example, in your example, the cost of goods sold for that item is like £3, and if the merchant didn't really permit maybe less than 5% profit margin, then we wouldn't really try to match that price. What can be done in that case, and what's mostly like done, I mean, we then tell you that you are not cheapest for that product in the market. And then that information can be maybe sent out to your Google Ad campaigns via API calls, etc. And then if you like, again, this is actually a further strategy. If you would, for example, like to remove the products which are not both profitable and competitive in the market from your Google Shopping feeds, and you might just want not to spend on them, that's applicable, that's doable. So that's what we really enable. We can really match against your competitors where it really fits your strategy. And if it doesn't, we also let you know that it didn't. So you can also use that insight in your growth channels, marketing channels.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. Now, in 17 days, we have Black Friday. And many retailers, this is the biggest period of the year. What I want to know from you is, what's the most common pricing or discounting mistakes you see brands making, so we can make sure that people are tuning on today's call don't make those same mistakes?
Well, like, great question, because I obviously come across those mistakes all the time, I would say. Not necessarily only during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but yeah, like this is where it all happens, like more common than before. I mean, I think one specific thing that I'm really against is blanket discounting, as we call it. So like you would just see all those 20% off, 30% off, 50% off across the store kind of campaigns here and there. Not here and there, like nearly everywhere. But that's really doesn't make sense at all, because I mean, all those products don't, for example, have the same margin. So why would you really kind of discount them at the same level when you don't really have the same margin? So how much margin are you sacrificing for product A, product B? I mean, that should really be part of the equation, right? And the other piece is that, for example, again, coming back to this underpricing aspect, if you, for example, are already cheap for a certain product, I mean, if you are really, for example, the cheapest for a product, do you really need to, even further discount that product? I mean, use that insight. Don't even discount, and maybe just come out and shout and say that, well, even without a discount, we are still the most competitive offer in the market. So we are not really discounting for that item. All those other guys are discounting and are not still able to catch our levels. Yeah. I mean, to do that, you obviously need to have some competitive intelligence in hand, and gathering that, like I said in the beginning, in a manual way is nearly impossible. So obviously you need to have, I think, in order to, let's say, mitigate that error, I would say mistake, you need to have some automation in place, either our tool or maybe one of our competitors, but you definitely need a automation. So like this blanket discounting thing should be really mitigated. And another thing that I also see, and especially in the recent years, holiday seasons, things started like way earlier than before. So it's not just 5 days, 1 weekend or anything anymore. It's like maybe even starting from summer here and there. So like people oftentimes like overplan, if that's the right way to put it. So they actually sit in their boardrooms, in their meeting rooms 2 months before and say, okay, we will discount this much, we will do this campaign, that and that. And then they actually sort of like spray and pray. So they come up with those fancy, shiny plans, very well thought and everything. But then the thing is, the market still runs. So the market is still dynamic. So another maybe board meeting happens in another company 1 week after, and they maybe also react to your offer and they actually come up with a better campaign. So your campaign sort of like sits there idle. So it's not really attractive anymore. So people oftentimes forget that this is actually an ongoing process. So it's not just a static discounting event, but you need to kind of apply, as we call it, agile pricing. So it's not just a one spot in time where you just actually make the decision and let it shine. You should really maintain those campaigns throughout the holiday season. You should be dynamically reacting against competitors during the holiday season. So again, due to over planning and due to the fact that people oftentimes are mostly falling in love with their plans and everything rather than execution, they sort of kind of fail to get most with their discounting. So these two mistakes are the most common ones that I encounter.
I love it. Thank you. And just building on that, in terms of quick wins, that's another thing. People listening today, that, as I said earlier, time is of the essence. We've only got 17 days. Is there any kind of quick win that if you say anyone from this call, go and do this afternoon, that's going to have a difference? What's it going to be?
Well, that's not really my field, but I would still say that inventory management is very closely tied to pricing. So we mostly see, even maybe with our merchants, because we don't solve their inventory problems ourselves with our technology. I mean, we see it a lot of times when merchants are actually, again, underpricing themselves or maybe like applying very, very aggressive discounting in the beginning of the holiday season. They actually run out of stock before the holiday season is over, and they cannot really replenish in time. So by doing that, they actually run out of stock too soon. I mean, let's say, hypothetically speaking, they would really have, they could have had maybe 5% less discounts, and they could have maybe survived with that stock throughout the whole holiday season. So they could maybe run out of stock in the very end of it. By doing that, again, they would have avoided a case where they would just leave money on the table, like that extra 5%. So inventory, like failure in inventory management, is to me a pricing mistake, a discounting mistake. Another one is really closely tied to what I said earlier. So thinking that this actually as a moment in time when you plan and then the plans will really work out is also kind of an illusion to me, also a mistake. So you should really need to have some technology in place. I mean, our tool and tools like ours, for example, like maybe this is not right for me to say, but have free trials, right? So just sign up for our free trial, abuse it for 14 days, and then don't ghost us afterwards. Like, don't even pay or anything. I wouldn't say this on a commercial, mindset, but I mean, that's really applicable. So hack your way to optimize things, maybe just for the holiday season. I'm confident to say that because I believe after 14 days, you would still stick around. But even, without that plan in mind, automate certain bits that can be automated just in seconds, have competitive intelligence in place as you plan for your, discounts. And then, then you would just be in a position where you're not just spraying and praying, really. You will be just having a plan and execution in place.
So to confirm, Birch, people can sign up for a 14-day free trial, no strings attached, give it a go and say, actually, this is working really well for my brand versus I need to optimize it. If people are enjoying it and want to optimize it further, is there a kind of merchant success manager or someone your end that can give them some tips on how to get even more from the platform, or how does that work?
Yeah, just for more context, I mean, you know this, Nathan, but maybe not all the listeners are knowing. So we are from Istanbul, Turkey, right? So we are actually like very hospitable people, very generous people. And oftentimes I like the fact that, this might be also even abused by our users, but in a nice way, right? So like we have the standard 14-day free trial, but we never, for example, decline a request where the merchant comes in and say, well, 14 days weren't enough for me. Can you extend it for another 2 weeks? So we are always in for such extensions and everything, so they can really do that. And again, coming back to this Turkish analogy, like if you ever been to a Turkish resort, Turkish restaurant, like if you ever encounter any kind of Turkish hospitality, you would know that we will really take good care of you during the free trial. So we will just jump on calls with you whenever you like. I mean, we don't really say, for example, 2 onboarding calls are included in this, but we can, do 5 calls with all your team, 1 call with your CEO, and as much as you like. And then, as you rightfully said, this is the inside sales bit. So when you are on the free trial, our sales team is actively trying to help you to make success. And then if you ever consider becoming a paid customer, and just for the listeners to know, we don't really have upfront commitments, strings attached, etc. So the bills are all monthly. You should just pay as you go. I mean, you can also, for example, abuse us in a way that you just sign up for the free trial, extend it for another 2 weeks, and then just pay only for 1 month, and you have covered the rest of the year. And during the period when you are still our customer, as you said, we have a merchant success team who just jumps on calls with you whenever you like. We have 724 live chat support because we are serving like 60 countries as of today. So even if you're in Australia, in EMEA, in America, we always have someone welcoming you on our website. So yeah, that's really how pricing works from a service standpoint.
But sorry, just to dive into that a little bit deeper, I'm just thinking out loud here for some of my brands that would love to give it a go. Like, is it then once the 14-day free trial is finished and they've decided, yes, I'd like to go ahead, is it a monthly rolling contract? Is it a 6-month contract? How does that work?
It's monthly, like I said, so it's just pay as you go. So if, some big enterprises somehow want that themselves, so they don't really want to pay on a monthly basis, but they pay upfront. I mean, if they like to do that, we are okay with that. But our typical deals are just on a rolling basis. So you sign up, you just subscribe, pay for the coming month, and you can just come to us and say in 29th day of the month, well, I don't really want to renew my monthly fee. I mean, can you just cancel it out? And we don't really ask. We obviously ask why, but not in a commercial way. I mean, we are totally okay if you don't want to continue. We really do that because again, I mean, this might be a bit of a salesy marketing talk, but that's really me. I mean, we really trust in our software. So we don't really try to lock our customers in a service that they wouldn't really renew on a monthly basis in a voluntary way. So we don't really want to force them and enforce them. So it's just on a rolling basis on a monthly level.
Man, that's really helpful. Thank you. So this year, obviously, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I'm expecting it to be different to other years in that there's uncertain economic times. We've got wars going on. Like, it's blimmin' difficult out there. For yourself, what differences or changes are you expecting to see in Black Friday, Cyber Monday this year that perhaps we haven't seen before?
Yeah, well, I would take the time frame maybe for the last 2-3 years instead of just this year, really, because I think the last maybe 2 years is better. I mean, we firstly started to feel the inflation. Again, with some Turkish context, we always had inflation at like double digits and everything, but that's something new in the West, I would say. So like with the inflation coming into the, let's say, environment, obviously consumers became more and more price sensitive. So discounting really started to make more sense. And without discounts, we probably would have ended up, maybe not selling at all in during holiday season. So I think this price sensitivity increase in the consumer side is a major thing. So we should really cater to that with our, campaigns, with our discounting. This is a big shift because like when the cash was free around the COVID, etc. I mean, people were buying anyways. So they were just buying stuff they wouldn't need at all. I mean, they had really like free, stimuli, free cash subsidies, etc. But now things just obviously turned as like black and white. So you should really need to actually cater to that phenomenon of price sensitivity in the consumer's mind. And the other thing, maybe closely linked to this, is that things started way earlier than before. I mean, since everyone is now sort of like technically offering discounts, it has become very noisy, and it's really, very noisy at the core of the holiday season. So some merchants, I would say smart merchants, are actually somehow like jumping off and saying that, well, we start our discounting 30 days before. So they sort of try to steal the show way earlier than the rest of the bunch. So this is actually kind of something that we see in our data as well. So we started to see way more discounts than before for example, now in October, in September, and even in August, really. So I think the expansion of the time frame when we define a holiday season is a major change. And one of the reasons why this is really happening is that people now need more discounts because they became more price sensitive due to inflation alone.
No, that's super helpful. Thank you. So I guess I've got a bit of a concern around bestsellers and how brands will deal with those. Like, do you include them in the discounting for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and potentially sell even more of the bestseller? Do you actually use this as an opportunity to promote other products? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I think inventory management for those bestsellers is crucial. So if you, for example, discount heavily and if you run out of stock for your bestsellers just in between, in the middle of the holiday season and you cannot replenish, is a big failure. So I think inventory should be really well managed for those bestsellers, especially. And when it comes to discounting those, I think another aspect that I would add here is the key value item phenomenon. So some of those bestsellers are typically anchored in the minds of our consumers, where they really call you a competitively priced merchant or not. For example, milks, eggs, those types of stuff are key value items in supermarkets, and they are eventually bestsellers because not everybody, but most supermarket buyers buy milk, eggs, and stuff. And if you, for example, put yourself into a very competitively priced position for those milks and eggs, etc., and don't do the same, don't do anything at all for the rest of the bunch, you can still anchor that image in your consumer's mind as a very competitively priced merchant. So this is, again, like focusing on key value items. You might even go further and maybe for not all products, but for just 1-2 products during the holiday season, you might even take the loss leadership, where you can maybe be okay for making a certain amount of maybe like loss that you can consider as a maybe marketing cost. That would then drive additional organic traffic, additional CPC traffic, additional traffic into your store that would convert elsewhere at higher margin products. So this is somewhat like cross-selling, upselling, etc. So I think if you really think that you have those type of key value items in your store, that would really convince your buyers to buy from you just due to this fact. That really double down on those. Maybe double down on those on like CPC channels like Google Shopping, where people are already price sensitive enough, and those discounts on key value items would attract more attention than before during holiday season. So yeah, I think this is one way. Again, like in short, make sure that you have those bestsellers in stock while you are doing this loss leadership thing. Otherwise, you would just leave a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. But you've got a question around that bundling. Do you see many brands at this time of year kind of bolting bestsellers along with poor sellers and creating bundles and trying to shift stock? Like, what have you seen?
Yeah, that's really, I think, somewhat what I said. So the one reason why people bundle stuff is to make those actually listings from an e-commerce standpoint uncomparable. So for example, let's say you compete on price and you compete an iPhone against an iPhone plus an accessory. So those are now no longer the identical products. So obviously you would expect the bundle product to be pricier than just iPhone, but how pricier, right? So I think people can play with your logic by bundling products in a nice way, in a commercial way, obviously, and just add a high margin, a high velocity product on top of a bestseller. They might maybe bring down the bestseller's price down, but add that bundled product and create an image that this is a great offer, so they can really like upsell, cross-sell that bundle to you. Like this is actually not necessarily need to be done really in a like bundle, but you don't necessarily need to bundle products, but you might, for example, just offer them as recommendations on your websites. So you don't really need to have a bundling solution in place. You don't really need to list bundles, but say you drive additional traffic to those key value items, have this actually kind of carousel kind of thing at the bottom and say that, these are all technologies like massively available right now. People often bought this with that and that. I think that's like indirectly bundling stuff with like products that are key value items, bestsellers, and maybe during that period, low margin with high margin products.
But question for you. Obviously, we talked a lot today about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and what you do, but actually, this must be super relevant for other key seasonal dates as well, right? Whether it be Valentine's or Father's Day or Mother's Day, etc. Do the same strategies apply no matter what key seasonal date, or actually are there certain nuances when we start talking about Christmas or Mother's Day or something like that?
Well, I mean, I am a big fan of always low pricing as Walmart sort of applies. So I don't really think that discounting should be like a sprint or anything. But, e-commerce is, as it stands, like a marathon. So it's not just a period of time when you just make the most of your sales and then you just pause and then, expect the same month to come by. So I think pricing shouldn't be, let's say, an afterthought in the merchant's mind at all. So it should be in their agenda, in their writing, meetings, etc., during 365 days of the year. Obviously, during these periods of time, we can maybe segment certain products which are relevant to that specific day, like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day. Like some products would obviously have more demand. Obviously, playing around with discounts by following the tips that I shared for the holiday season would work out. But if you think that people are also going to buy stuff, maybe less, but they will still buy stuff on January, in February, etc. So sort of following the same logic where you try to actually achieve a profitable and a competitive price at the same time and marketing those products more aggressively than the rest of the bunch would eventually yield you success, even if it's holiday season or not. Obviously, like this becomes more important during the holiday season. But my advice to all listeners, all merchants all around the world, to take this as a marathon, like not just a sprint.
Interesting, but I see this potential product being useful for almost all retailers, but certainly those multi-brand retailers, right? Like, would you say there is a sweet spot in terms of customer for you that seem to get more out of the tool than others, or actually does it work for almost all brands?
Well, I would say you nailed it, Nathan, because we really specify our ideal customer profile from a marketing standpoint as multi-brand retailers across the world, really. So because we don't really have any technological or geographical challenges, we have customers from more than 60 countries. We track prices from 100 countries and all. But if you are a merchant, if you're a retailer that lists and stocks products that can be easily Googled and easily identified on tens of different retailers, well, that's our sweet spot, really. Because if you think it that way, I mean, if you're a consumer and if you Google for, a sneaker, let's say a Nike sneaker or whatever, you will then have pages of Google Shopping or Google results, and you will just most probably take the most reputable and most competitive price. So in order to get that click and in order to get that conversion, all those retailers need to do something. I'm not saying that they need to be the cheapest, but they need to keep in mind that their consumers are already competing on price. They are already, comparing prices. So if your consumers are doing something and you are not doing that, I mean, that's a big failure in empathic marketing or whatever you call it. And that's actually a guaranteed, I would say, failure. So that's really how I see it. So long and so short, again, I talk a lot, but multi-brand retailers, I would say, are our sweet spot. So if you are actually buying products from different brands, if you stock maybe like hundreds, thousands of products, where it really makes no sense or where it's really impossible to do all that comparison in a manual way, you should really use some automation, preferably our automation.
But this conversation has absolutely flown by and you've provided so much value. So a massive thank you for your time today. I'm really so glad that we managed to get some time in to share with our audience about the Ecomm pricing guy and everything you guys are doing at Prisync. Just to wrap up for today, but just the one key takeaway, just recapping everything we've discussed, what's the one thing you would love people to leave from today and say, actually, if I'm going to remember Birch, if I'm going to remember that session that Nathan Him did around Prisync, what is the one thing you want people to take away?
Yeah, well, again, echoing what I said, like pricing shouldn't be really an afterthought during the rest of the holiday season. So when the holiday season is, over, when the demand maybe dries a little bit down, you should still think about pricing. And thinking about pricing means that doing something about that, optimizing it as you also optimize your marketing channels. And while doing that, I would definitely recommend relying on some degree of automation, like I said, either ours or our competitors. And specifically for the holiday season, again, avoid over planning beforehand and not doing anything during the holiday season. I mean, this might mean overtime, this might mean working during holiday, but make sure that your discounts, your campaigns are still relevant during the holiday season, because your competitors might also apply something like one day after you, 1 week after you, and those campaigns that you planned a week earlier might be redundant, might be irrelevant. So make sure that you also monitor the market during the holiday season. Make sure you still act dynamically during the holiday season. And, to add on what I said earlier, make sure that you do the same after the holiday season as well.
Lovely. Birch, thank you so much for your time, my friend. For all those listening, I hope you've enjoyed it. Keep your eyes peeled. Birch and I dare say, we'll be putting some more content together, and hopefully we'll be bringing more tech partners to you to just show the amazing ecosystem that we have. So please, for now, thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Birch, for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again.
Cheers. Bye.